All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are so excited to speak to you about this particular program. So our presentation tonight is on conservation and community projects in Africa and why they are so critical to many of the countries in Africa. At Africa Endeavours, we are very passionate about these particular projects and programs. And so we're excited to talk to you about the sustainability and the conservation projects that happen all around you. And when you travel, why your tourism dollars are so critical to those communities and conservation projects. We're also going to give you some ideas of some ways when you travel to Africa, how you might be able to get involved in some of them. So we're going to move forward here. All right. So these are your hosts today. You have me, Shannon Bradley, and Candice Heckle, who we are both with Africa Endeavours, and then our friends Brooke and Johann, who are passionate about Africa and conservation and projects, and we're excited to have you hear about some of the stuff that they have to talk about in South Africa and Kenya. So just really quickly, a lot of you already know about Africa Endeavours, sister company to Down Under Endeavours. But just to give you a little bit of information, we are certainly experts, and we do try and find places for you to travel that are off the beaten path, but also focus on conservation and community projects so that you can see how all of those things work together in a wonderful way. Also giving you the opportunity, obviously, to see wildlife. It's really about discovery. Almost everybody we talk to the first time they go to Africa, they come back and it's a life-changing experience. And so we also just get an idea from you of what you want out of your safari and your travel so that we make sure that it's customized to you. So moving forward, this is our agenda for this evening. As I said, this webinar is being recorded. We do have someone actually taking a look at the chat box. So if you do have questions, we will answer those at the end. So if you can please go ahead and mute your line, just so that there's no background noise and everybody can hear, because we do have some gorgeous videos to show you as well. And then we'll go through those question and answer at the end. So I'm gonna start off talking about my my visit to a RIMBA village in Namibia. That is a mouthful. And Candice is then going to talk about Reteti and SARARA in Kenya. And then Brooke's going to talk about Swallow Kalahari in South Africa. And then Johann will end with his fabulous accent and projects in Kenya. So this is just giving you an idea of why these projects are so important to these communities. This particular picture we love here, it is a bike project in Zambia, and it's all owned and run by women of the villages in the Zambia area. So sorry, I'm admitting people in. I see it popping up on my screen. So the things that we select for you to do are going to be environmentally friendly. They're going to focus on sustainability. A lot of your tourism dollars are going to go to the local community and the private game reserves for conservation and anti-poaching and all of those things to protect the community and the wildlife. So let's move to Namibia. For those of you who don't know where Namibia is, it's right there on the map you can see. It is just west of Botswana and north of South Africa. And if you don't have Namibia on your list, I really recommend that you put it on your list. It is the second least densely populated country in the world. And this is a picture of me in my pink Cubs hat sitting here, looking off into a beautiful sunset in Namibia. It's mostly about landscapes and culture. You're not going to get a lot of animals. There is a big 4 game park called Etosha National Park. Because of the aridness and the dryness of the area, they do not have buffalo. Buffalo are very, very water dependent, as are most animals. So what I want to talk to you about is our RIMBA village visit that we did. These lovely people are one of the most isolated cultures in the world, and they are nomadic. And what I loved about this particular experience is it is not commercialized at all. our partner that we use in Namibia, Ultimate Safaris Namibia, is very mindful about how they expose the culture to tourists. There's only 1 or 2 groups that go a week, if that. We did drive about 3 hours to get to their village. And so it's just very remote. And one of the things that they do is it's a cultural exchange, and it's an exchange of goods. It's not something whereby the tourists are coming to the village to pay them. Yes, we do give them a small donation, but it's in Namibian dollars, and it is meant for healthcare and medical supplies only. The other things that come to them are going to be supplies that they need to make their food. So it's very well done. It's not commercialized at all. Now, once we had an opportunity to meet some of these lovely women, then we went to into one of their huts with this lovely woman and her, I think it was a son here, and she told us about their bathing rituals. Now, Namibian women do not bathe with water. They use the red ochre for their hair, so you can see it in their braids, and they use oils and herbs for their cleanliness. They also use a smoking mechanism, so to clean their garments. We actually had our guide who would translated from her traditional Click language so that we could understand what she was saying. It was just a really cool experience, and it was very natural and didn't feel like it was something where she was giving us a show, right? So then at the end, they do dance for us. And this lovely, beautiful little girl here, Linda, I just fell in love with her, and she is actually dressed in Western clothing. She has pink high tops on that you can't see. But she, actually, they send the girls to school from RIMBA villages because they are more likely to return to the village, as opposed to the boys who many times may meet somebody and not come back to the village. So I feel like I wanted to share this with you as a community project and a sharing of resources between a company in Namibia and a RIMBA village that isn't making a big impact on them. They still continue with their very traditional lifestyle, and we're able to understand that a little bit better. So really cool experience. I'm gonna turn it over to my colleague Candice now, and she is gonna talk to you about Kenya. Candice, you're muted.
I'm super on top of it. Sorry. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about Namaniak Wildlife Conservancy. My husband and I spent some time up there, well, over there last August, and it's a pretty spectacular place, pretty special. It's located in northern Kenya. Here's a photo of me kind of at the foot of the Matthews Range, which is this really beautiful mountain range in northern Kenya, sort of dividing kind of civilization to no man's land heading north. So let me just go. So Namaniak, a little bit of background on this. It is actually a massive conservancy. It's about 850,000 acres. It's larger than Yellowstone National Park. It was started in 1995, and the key to the success was really to make sure the local Samburu were intricately involved in protecting the lands and the local animals. With such a large area, oh, sorry, Shannon, we can go on to the next slide too. With such a large area, we're gonna focus our discussion today on SARARA, which is a lodge there. They actually have 3 camps. The portfolio includes SARARA Camp, SARARA Tree Houses, and SARARA House. And then on the next slide, there's gonna be, this is the view from the main lounge area at SARARA. So as you can see, it's like looking out over into the vast valley. It's absolutely stunning and very hot. So activities from here include safari drives, bushwalks, horse riding, to name a few. But the 2 things that I'm going to talk to you about today are within close proximity to the lodge. You can visit the Reteti Elephant Sanctuary, and then also the Singing Wells. So this is just a shot of SARARA, the team at SARARA. So these are SARARA or Samburu elders and warriors. So these are actually your guides and the people you interact with while you're staying there. So it's a pretty authentic experience. Your guide, since he's a local, has an intimate knowledge of flora and fauna that stretches back for generations because his family's been there for a long time. It's a great way to get to know somebody, to chat about the daily ins and outs of life there and what it's like to grow up there. I still keep in touch with our guy, Coleman. He sends me photos of his family and what's going on there. I send him photos of snow and the city. So it's, you know, it's nice to still have that connection back to such a special place. So a few interesting facts about Samburu people. They're cousins to the Maasai, and I think most people have heard of Maasai. They're semi-nomadic. They herd mostly cattle. And they're also known as the butterfly people because of their colorful and decorative style of dress, which you can see from this photo here. So now I'm going to chat to you about the singing well. So as you can see, there's no photo here. Part of the reason is that because to be sensitive to the culture and to the experience, their photos are not allowed. Most people, while they're digging the wells, are naked. So no photos make sense. But the really awesome experience about the singing wells is that this has been going on for generations. Basically, almost every local family owns a well, I guess is the best way to say it so we understand it. But the way it works is that during dry season, when there's not a lot of water, the family goes to the well and they sort of create this human chain. And they're in the well and they're have no clothes on and they're digging the water. And while they're doing it, they're digging and they're singing and bringing the waters up to the trough. And the song, the most amazing thing about this is that the cattle know their particular song for their family. So they come running to the trough of their own family. So you'll see it's chaos. There's a lot of different things going on, different people, sounds, music everywhere. And then the cattle always know exactly where to go because of the song, which I think is absolutely amazing. And then to just kind of drive home this connection with conservation that the Samburu people now have. When they used to dig the wells, they would just, you know, water their animals, end of day, go home. But now they actually fill the troughs with water because it's actually common for the elephants, herds of buffalo, even that's a common place for leopards to come and drink at night. So it's just kind of resetting the mindset. And now they're, you know, thinking of ways to protect and kind of, you know, water the livestock and as well as the wildlife. So moving on, the next really amazing experience you can have here is a visit to Roteti Elephant Sanctuary. This is definitely one of the highlights of a stay there, only because everybody loves baby elephants. You don't necessarily want them to be in an elephant sanctuary, but they do some pretty amazing work. This was opened in 2016. It's owned and operated by the local community. It's the only community owned and staffed elephant sanctuary, and it's the only one that employs women as keepers. So you'll see Dorothy, she's the tall one sort of in the center leading back. She's the head keeper and she is absolutely amazing, super passionate, and her job there is groundbreaking because it's really the first time a woman Samburu has sort of held a position like that. Everybody there is highly educated and formally trained in rehabilitation and the eventual release to the animals. And all those milk bottles that you see, they test urine and dung and blood samples of each baby that comes through there, and they basically create a specific formula to each baby. So it's highly scientific. The lab is pretty amazing. And if you go visit there, you get to go on a tour and learn all about the work that they're doing there. The sanctuary is funded through multiple initiatives and also from daily tourists. So one nice thing when you do visit there from SARARA, like there's nobody else because the closest lodge is another 3 hours drive away through pretty bad roads. So it's a really intimate, unique experience. But the key to the success really is the cooperation between the local Samburu and their dedication to save and protect their local wildlife and land. So now we're gonna watch some little elephants feeding. So it's feeding time. Want to play that? As you can see, they really, really like feeding time. And insider tip, if you do go to SARARA, you want to do the lunch feeding, because after this, then it's mud bath time. So you get extra interaction with the elephants. So yeah, so that's it for me. I am going to now introduce you to Brooke. She's going to talk to you about some amazing stuff that SWALU's doing down in South Africa.
We're actually going to start with just a very quick video, and then I will start to tell you a little bit more about what you see in that video. Oh, Shannon, you might need to be unmuted for the sound to come through.
The SWALU Foundation was formed with the primary objective of enabling a conduit for guests to facilitate research on SWALU. We've got 3 research themes: conservation biology, anthropology, and climate change.
Oh,
Sorry, Brooke.
well, no worries. Then you know what? We will hopefully see if we can include the video in a follow-up, but just go ahead to the next slide and I'll just get going because I can easily explain what it is that we were looking at. Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so basically that video was all about conservation and community because that is very much what SWALU stands for and what that property is all about. SWALU, as you can see on the map here, we are in South Africa and we're in what's called the Green Kalahari. So we are actually the largest privately owned game reserve in the entire country, and our specific mission is to restore the Kalahari to itself. So we do focus on conservation and community in ways where our guests can always participate in the research and the sustainability that is being done on property. And where we are in that Green Kalahari, we're certified as or classified as an arid savanna and a grassland. So that enables us to be home to some very rare and elusive and endangered species. And that is exactly how we do so much research, both on the animals, but also very much on climate change and then other factors. So to give you an idea of the history, we're going to show you a photo of how SWALU started. And you can see on the right there of the screen, terrible land degradation. It was mismanaged. It was just misused. And over time, the owners of SWALU continued to buy up all of these different farms. They would take down the fences, they would rehabilitate the land, and then reintroduce species that always historically existed here. And then today, you'll see a photo of what that landscape actually is meant to look like and what it does look like today. Pristine land, absolutely beautiful, actually a multiple of different ecosystems. So within SWALU, which is 300,000 acres, we have Duneveld, Bushveld, mountain and plain shrubveld, and so much more. And it's all of these different ecosystems that, again, allow for all of that research that guests can participate in. On property, we do have a research center, a tracker academy, an artist in residence program, and then a lot of community outreach. And yes, you are going to go on safari. When guests are with us, they can do game drives. We do walks, horse riding, sleep out, helicopters, and all of this is for us so that you, coming to see us, can see the game and learn from a very different vantage point than just being on a vehicle. And we use things like the helicopter in our anti-poaching and our conservation interests as well. So the SWALU Foundation exists primarily to support the ecological research on property. And when guests come and stay at SWALU, part of what it is that they are funding is that SWALU Foundation. And many of our guests will also turn around, it's never asked or required, but they'll say, I fell in love with a project that I learned about and I'd love to participate in one way or another. So through the kind of accumulation of all of this important information on flora, fauna, the habitat of the Southern Kalahari, we've been able to make some really good management decisions to support that shared vision. SWALU means a new beginning. So again, all about restoring. In this photo right now, you're actually seeing Wendy, who is our pangolin researcher, and she also works on behalf of our new program called KEEP, which stands for Kalahari Endangered Ecosystem Project. And this is very innovative, very holistic, because it is actually looking at species and then the ecosystem within which they exist in response to climate change and global warming. Besides the project focusing on wildlife in a warming world, no study anywhere else in Africa has actually investigated the effects of climate change on multiple species within the same ecosystem. And so the research goes beyond just one single level and identifies the full ecosystem within the habitat. And if we look at the next slide, I'm going to show you a couple of different photos as well of those very rare, elusive, and endangered species that we're doing research on. So things like the sociable weaver nest, which are ecological engineers for sure. I'm not a birder. I've never been interested in birding until I got to SWALU, and I could sit and watch weavers all day long. They're absolutely fascinating. In the upper right-hand corner, you actually see a Damaraland mole rat. And so we're studying the colony composition there. And of course, a lot with rhino. And we were speaking before we started recording about pangolin. So pangolin is a very big project for us at SWALU because we do have that researcher. And again, as we were speaking about, I mean, pangolin are now considered the most trafficked species in the world. I think that we in 10 years have actually accounted for about 1 million pangolin that have been poached, or 1 every 5 minutes if you watch this documentary, Eye of the Pangolin, that we were involved in. And that gives you more of that information, not just about the pangolin in South Africa, but 4 different countries around Africa. And as I was speaking about guests being able to participate, we welcome guests to go out and meet with our researchers, to be included in a capture, a release, a tagging, a count, to talk with them, to learn from them, to go to the research center. So again, everything that we're doing on property is something that we always welcome guests to visit. And you would have seen this in the video, but the video also shows you things like the school, the clinic, the garden, all of the community outreach that we're doing on property. And so on top of the research, we do have that artist in residence program. We've got the clinic, the school. We actually support not just people within the SWALU system, but much further afield because of that very remote location. And the SWALU Foundation started to support an artist in residence program as a way to highlight specific South African artists and really encourage them to gain inspiration from the flora, the fauna, the culture, the landscapes at SWALU. Then the community, it's not, like I said, just our staff members, but researchers, visiting doctors that support our healthcare system, all of the artists or guests. I mean, we really do a lot to make sure that our community and the larger community are supported. And then that goes into the culinary program that we started recently. We actually partnered with South Africa's first Michelin-starred chef. He's on the right there, Jan Hendrik, and on the left is Marnus, who's our executive chef. And for instance, they're going out into the Kalahari and they're foraging Kalahari truffles, Kalahari melons, but also working with local purveyors. So things like camel milk cheese or camel carpaccio. Again, it's just lowering our footprint to ensure that we're working within a very localized way to then carry out that mission of sustainability. So lots of different projects that fall within the SWALU Foundation, all of which guests can participate in, and all of which are truly making a very big difference in Africa and hopefully the world, as that research gets sent back to places like zoos that Shannon and I were talking about earlier as well. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my lovely, handsome husband here, Johann. I'll say one other thing. I love that both Candice and Shannon have photos of themselves in their presentations. I shied away from that. I think Johann has one or two. But I will also say that every one of the properties and the places that we're speaking about, we've been to personally, we know intimately, and are also looking forward to questions at the end of all of this.
Oh, my wife's always a hard act to follow. But I'm just going to take us a little bit back up to Kenya as well. And I mean, I loved Candice's presentation. The area she was in is there just to the north of, you know, right above the top circle there. And those singing wells are still on my gonna do list, and I definitely want to get out there. I tried to go there once, and they closed the lodge early that year, and I just missed it. But it is such an amazing area. Now, for me, I wanted to touch base a little bit on Kenya because it is such a diverse country with not just diverse landscapes and amazing range of animals, but also it's still a very traditional country where you have societies like the Samburu people that Candace showed us there, and the Maasai people that's world renowned in the south. You know, people still live traditionally on the land, and you have the animals, and then you have conservation programs, you know, bumping up against population growth, against farming pressures and all of those kind of things. And I think Kenya is a good example that there's not just one system that works everywhere. Depending on who owns the land and the everything behind each area, you know, it also determines what you would do to conserve that land. So we can do next slide. In the overall picture, you know, you've got community, conservation, commerce, and culture. Now, sometimes we talk about communities here and conservation there, but the reality is in places like Kenya, that overlaps. You cannot have conservation without the communities buy into that, and you cannot protect the communities without, you know, having them buy into conservation of the land and of their traditional cultures and everything like that. And part of how you actually achieve that is through commerce. Because if you really think about it, these guys out there in the middle of nowhere, they have no way to partake in the world economy, you know, in manufacturing or, you know, IT work or something like that. But the way that they can partake in the world economy is by, you know, taking the land and the beauty of that and preserving that, and then having us come and visit. And then our visits and the dollars we spend there on accommodation and on the park fee or the conservancy fee can then fund their schools and clinics and things like that, so that they kind of get their little few crumbs of the world economic pie. And I'm going to look at sort of three different areas, just to kind of sort of a high-level highlight of how these areas differ from each other. One of my favorites is a little area called the CHYULU Hills, or the Amboseli ecosystem, that actually overlooks Mount Kilimanjaro. And it's quite literally what Hemingway called the green hills of Africa. Those CHYULU Hills are beautiful green hills with a cloud forest on the top. And this area, a small part of it is protected as the CHYULU Hills National Park. But between Kilimanjaro, Amboseli, Tsavo, and CHYULU Hills, there's vast areas of land. I'm talking about hundreds of square miles of land where the Maasai technically own the land or have the right to live there. The government sort of owns the land, to have the right to live there. And as soon as the animals move out of the national parks, they come in conflict with the communities. And, you know, the lion kills your cow, so you get upset about it and you go kill the lion. And that's sort of a cycle that's gone on for a very long time. Because I think sometimes we all think, you know, Kumbaya, these communities love living with the wildlife, and they don't really. You know, just like we don't tolerate wildlife, you know, threatening our kids or our livestock and everything like that. The same for them, you know, they will take care of it if there's an ongoing conflict, because otherwise they don't have food to eat, or they don't have a way to survive. Now, in this area, what we've done here quite uniquely is set up a conservation trust. And some of you may recognize Ed Norton, the actor in the middle there. He's actually a super nice guy and a very passionate conservationist. And he's helped us to also get other grants and funding and income, because there's always more need in the communities than you can kind of generate income from just tourism. And in this area, we've made a huge impact with the communities. This is just a snapshot of that. For instance, there was never a medical clinic here. So people, really died of preventable diseases or things went untreated. We set up 2 clinics and, roughly 17,000 doctors' visits a year. Simple things, prenatal care, things that then just never had access to. We employ 135 rangers. They run around in the background, making sure that everything is under control. And they also act as our, sort of community liaison, because they'll warn the community when the lions are in the area so that they put an extra guard out at night, or the elephants are there, put a guard out so that it protects your vegetable garden. And then there's a lot of children in that area. And yes, the government will give you teachers in Kenya, but their funds are limited. They may give you 1 teacher for maybe 120 kids. And we all know that's not a great situation. So just directly funded through the conservation and the tourism operation here, we employ 62 extra teachers. And that makes the big difference there. When I was there the last time, in one little manyata or village, lions on 2 consecutive nights killed cows. And I mean, I can tell you, if you kill a Maasai's cow, I mean, it's like killing a child. They know them by name. They've grown up with them. They were ready to go sort out those lions. And the head chief of that little village talked them down, the little warriors, the gung-ho guys who wanted to go kill the lions, because he knows that is the income from that is what's putting his kids in school, what's driving the medical clinic and all the other programs we run there. And we compensate them for any losses to wildlife, and then help them to minimize that conflict. How did the lion get to your cow? Oh, it came through the wall of your boma is not strong enough. Let's help you build a bigger one. And over the course of 20 years in this area, it went from an area that was denuded with no lions, for instance, because they always came in conflict with the communities, to now having so many lions that they are repopulating other areas around us that haven't seen lions in 100 years. And that's all, made possible by the tourism initiative here as well, and people coming to visit and see and experience this. So that's one area where people live on the benefit. Laikipia up in the north, that area just south of where Candice was earlier in the presentation. Now here we have very different land, because now you have these big sort of Texas-sized cattle ranches that are privately owned. And as soon as you have privately owned land, you can do different activities there. So you can do night drives and walks and mountain bikes and get out and see a little bit more. But you also now have to manage that land. The beauty is there's not a lot of other tourists around. When you're staying at a lodge here, you're typically the only people in this area. So it's a very nice experience. But then in this area, you have also very unique animal species, and they're all highly endangered. The eastern black rhino in the top left there's around 800 left in the world. The gravy zebra, my favorite zebra, because they have the little Mickey Mouse ears, and they're prettier than any other zebra that you will see in Africa. There's only about 3,000–4,000 of them left. The same with the reticulated giraffe in the south. So what's fun about this area is these animals you will only see here. You don't even see them in the rest of Kenya or in the rest of Africa. So it's a great reason to go there. But because they are so endangered, every property there will have to have a really strong conservation initiative to look after those animals. And you may have a big private ranch, but you still have communities around you. So it's very important to interact with the communities. When there's a period of drought, for instance, sometimes you let the community come graze their cattle in the reserve. Because if they survive and they're positive about you, that's your protection. Top left there is school children. There's one property there hosts 7,000–8,000 school children a year. Because quite often in Africa, the local community, they don't have the means or to kind of go visit a national park or a fancy reserve or something like that. So you bring these guys in because they're the decision makers of tomorrow, and teach them about ecology, teach them, in that case there, the web of life, how everything is connected. And tomorrow's decision makers will hopefully, have an eye on conservation. And then, of course, many different programs there with wildlife. That's actually Brooke again up on the top right with Alfie, a little rhino who got cataracts in his eyes and went blind. And they went so far in this area to even try to attempt the first ever cataract surgery on a rhino in the wild, which unfortunately his eyes was too far gone and they couldn't save him. But he lives in a protected environment because it's important to protect the DNA of that very endangered species. So here is all about private land. And then when we move on to, before we move on, wonderful accommodations in this area. I'm not going to talk about that today. That's why you have the whole team at Africa Endeavours. They've been to all of these lodges. They can match the right accommodations with you. And, you can never go wrong in Africa. But the last area we'll focus on sort of the lower left is the Masai Mara. And we've all heard of the Masai Mara, Serengeti. It's actually one big ecosystem. And it is the most famous in Kenya, and together with the Serengeti, the most famous in East Africa. And for a reason. I mean, those wild open plains, the migration comes up there a certain time of the year. You've got phenomenal animal viewing. But it's also an area, so now we're talking about a reserve, not private land and not a community land. And in this reserve area, if we can go to the next slide there, you've got beautiful accommodations again. So again, the Africa Endeavours team can really, really help you with that. But on the following slide, if you're in the reserve, now parts of it can be a little bit like Yellowstone or Yosemite, where at certain times of the year, there's too many cars, too many vehicles. So that's again where a team like Africa Endeavours team comes in, so they can make sure you have that experience on the right and not on the left, Sometimes if you really want to see a specific river crossing, you cannot fully avoid, seeing other vehicles, but you can really make that experience a lot more towards the right than towards the left. And they have different conservation pressures there as well. Now, the Masai Mara is a protected reserve. So, your park fee and everything there will go to the reserve. But as you can see on that next slide, that's great on the map. As you can see there, sort of, towards the middle left, you've got the Mara Conservancy and the Masai Mara National Preserve. That's the part that's formally protected as a reserve. Now, to the top and to the right of that, you see all those red lines. Those are elephants' migratory routes. And in a country like Kenya, something like 80% of their wildlife do not live in protected areas. They're in these community land where you have a protected reserve, and then next to it, you've got land that there's normally a buffer zone, and then eventually you get where you may have some Maasai and communities, and then further out until you get to farmland. So it's very, very important here to also protect that land and those conservancies around it. And those almost 100% rely on tourism income to fund what they do. Around the Mara, it's very common now to have a land lease program where you literally pay the Maasai every single month to keep going on with conservation versus farming. Because as soon as you start farming, your first initiative would be to put down a fence around your land to keep the critters out so you can raise your vegetables and whatever. And as soon as you fence off the land, it's lost to the wildlife. The animals can't move around anymore. So conservation is driven here very much by tourism and keeping that in the right place. On the next one, in those buffer zones around, you also have access to communities. You can visit schools, you can visit Maasai communities. It's kind of nice because very few other people do. So you can have an authentic cultural experience. And, in Safari Africa, as I call it, between the Maasai and the Samburu and then the Himba down in Namibia, those are my all-time favorite sort of traditional culture experiences. And we're going to play a short video. This is from the local Maasai. They are talking in Ma, so hopefully you can read what they're saying, and the sound is not that important.
Tidia wa wajo lo gina maana na ore rubo na na ko ne lo gina maana oro kwa la MAASAI ne ko ni ma ni ko ga shi ani ko ba ko rai da ora mo ore ne kwa la ai gida ne ne sho ma bu ga ma bu ni wa ya ga ore la ma ku la ko ba dare abi mes iswa ne ne na ba ku ba ba
So, you know, all of this, you know, to me, what I really like about Africa is, you know, there's a common saying that, you know, you plan your trip to go on safari to see the wildlife. That's what we dream of. We've all seen Nat Geo our whole life, and we want to go and see the safari component. And then when you're there, you also fall in love with the landscapes. And we always say you return for the people. So that landscape, the conservation, the safari, the people, their culture, I mean, it literally all depends on someone like you visiting and experiencing that. And I think it's a win-win situation for Africa to partake in the world economy and for people from our neck of the woods here visiting and quite often having, you know, one of their most moving, you know, life-changing experiences. And yeah, I'm sure the team's ready to help set that up for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We do just have a handful of questions, and I think Brooke and Johann, we actually discussed this, you and I and Candice, the other day. There is a question about the elephants in Botswana and the unfortunate deaths that they've had since March. Brooke, Johann, Candice, do any of you want to comment on that particular? I mean, obviously we don't know what's happening, but I don't know if any of you have some insight for our guests.
Do you want to take that one?
I mean, in Botswana, so this is a case that they are still investigating. So apparently, actually this week, they said they should have samples back from having sent it to 2 or 3 different veterinary colleges where they could actually analyze that. It could be one of 2 things. I have been personally up in Botswana. There are certain times of the year when they get a little bit of natural occurring anthrax, and that can kill some of the population. It's normally a bit later in the year when they get heat stress, normally around November. So this would be fairly early for that. But the reality is we don't know. I mean, and as soon as we don't know, it's gonna, you know, the whole thing like with coronavirus, no one knows exactly where we're going to be in 2 or 3 months, so everyone's speculating. So you get a little bit of that effect as well. You know, is it the community that's poisoning the water and the elephants? I mean, I've seen a couple of things like that, but the reality is hopefully within the next week or so, we will, you know, get a clear idea of what's happening there. There are also natural outbreaks like a bird flu kind of thing, and so in different populations of animals. And fortunately, you know, so far it's only affected a few hundred elephants, and Botswana happens to have the largest population of elephants in the world, like 140,000 elephants. So, you know, none of us would know the difference, and it's kind of far from the main safari areas. It's more like on the outskirts of that. So it wouldn't affect anyone's trip, but we're all concerned, and we're all, you know, hoping it's, you know, just something natural that will, you know, quickly go away.
Thank you, Johann. Candice, I'm going to throw this one to you. How long would you recommend to stay at SARARA or at CHYULU to get the most from their experience? And are there other activities to do in and around the Matthews Ranges?
I'll let Brooke answer CHYULU, but I would say 4 or 5 for CHYULU. Matthews at SARARA, minimum 3 probably, just so you're not, it's, especially if you're going during dry season, it's really hot. So you want some time to enjoy that pool because those days get toasty. And the activities really, you can fly camp. There is another camp up like at the top of the ranges where you can actually combo that with SARARA if you're looking at something that's a little bit more walking based. but the main activities really are the safari drives, the singing wells, and the Riteti Animal Sanctuary. I mean, it's not a destination that you would go to see. It's not teeming with game, but you do see plenty of elephant. We did see herds of buffalo. You do see, a reticulated giraffe and gravy zebra. But yeah, the main focus really is those two things that I spoke about. So to do it in a like kind of more of a chill out pace, I would definitely recommend 3 nights. Again, just because those afternoons get really hot.
But I also think, Candice, too, with if people want to do Riteti and they want to do the singing wells, I mean, you kind of, and you've got kind of maybe you may arrive midday, like 3 nights would be the minimum.
Yeah, I mean, we did those in the same day only because we were on a little bit more rushed itinerary, so it is possible. But yeah, 3 nights really would be the minimum recommendation.
Awesome. Brooke, do you just want to comment about CHYULU real quick?
Yeah, sure, of course. And I like, Candice, that you said, you were there on a rushed itinerary for 3 days. I think that so many people right now are looking for a more slow safari, and we're also seeing people really wanting to immerse themselves to the point of this entire presentation, not just in the game drives, but the overall experience. So I've personally been to CHYULU a couple of times for 4 nights, and every single time I had to forego some activity that I wanted to do, and I was still moving quickly. I also understand the North American market. We don't have as much time. I would really encourage at least 4 nights. I would love to see people stay 5 nights. CHYULU has some amazing packages that African Endeavours has that they can book for you. And then I'll also say that we have lots of repeat guests that come and stay for 7 nights. So depending on how you want your safari to look when you are working with your team to make that come together, you kind of can't spend too much time at CHYULU, truly, but that 4 or 5 night is most likely what I'm going to see from, from a U.S. traveler or North American market.
I would also say about CHYULU is that besides the fact that the experiences are amazing, like the lodge itself, it's pretty amazing. So you could easily spend a lot of time there, not even worry about what's going on around you. So.
Yeah, I mean, we have a photo studio, we've got a gallery, we've got a spa. You just want to read a book as well. I mean, we all talk about safari as like, check, 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 check. No one wants to just go and check boxes anymore. Like, you actually want to enjoy the experience to be, and you've spoken about properties that are very large and expansive as well. There's not that many opportunities that we have to go and sit in the middle of 300,000 acres, have no noise pollution, no light pollution, nobody else around. It's exactly what we all need right now, I think, to kind of heal our souls a little bit and our minds a little bit.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, ladies. We don't have any other questions, but I do want to give a shout out to my good friend and client, Nathan Caldwell, has traveled with us a couple of times, and he actually did a trip with us to Africa. And he says, while the large animals are may be what you go to see, the abundance and diverse bird species are also really a big bonus. And anybody will tell you that they don't go to Africa being a birder and they leave being a birder. So Nathan and Terry, when they did their trip, they saw over 70 different species of birds in the 4 different countries that they visited. So don't discount the beautiful birds in Africa as well. That being said, I want to just give a little quick plug. Our next Travel Tuesdays is going to be unique wildlife in Australia. I mean, who doesn't want to talk about koalas and kangaroos, right? So that will be coming up on August 4th. We actually have 2 Australians that are going to be presenting to you, and we're hoping somebody actually live from Australia. So it's going to be a really awesome webinar. I want to say thank you so much to everybody for joining. Thank you, Brooke and Johann, for being with us.
Yeah.
So appreciate it. Everybody have a fantastic evening. And your team at Africa Endeavours will be following up with you with a recording. Also, I know the videos were a little bit choppy, so we'll certainly get those to you as well because they're fabulous videos. So thank you so much. Enjoy your evening, everyone.
Everybody, good night.
Candice, thanks.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, Doug. Hey, team.